Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're pushing through the last few miles of a marathon.
Hmm.
On a day so hot, the asphalt seems to shimmel. Remember that initial burst of energy at the starting line?
Yeah, I can picture that.
Now every muscle is screaming and the finish line feels impossibly distant. That deep, bone-tired exhaustion, that feeling of not again, it's, well, surprisingly similar to what happens with change fatigue in organizations.
That's a really vivid comparison.
We kick off with enthusiasm for new strategies, but the constant barrage of new processes and expectations can just leave us utterly depleted.
And it highlights a key point.
Hmm.
Change fatigue isn't just about being tired, It's a specific kind of mental and emotional exhaustion,
Right.
stemming from relentless adaptation in, well, a short period. Think about how many organizations had to pivot seemingly overnight at the start of the pandemic.
Oh, definitely.
New work models, unfamiliar tech, the lines between personal and professional life just dissolving.
Yeah.
That widespread experience really brought change fatigue into sharp focus.
Exactly. And that's the deep dive we're taking today. Change fatigue.
Hmm.
We've sifted through a range of sources, academic studies, industry reports, expert insights to get a clear picture.
Yeah, covering all the bases.
What it is, what triggers it, how it impacts both individuals and the wider organization, and crucially, how we can navigate and manage it effectively.
And we'll look at the warning signs too, right?
Yep, the early signs, and also how much weight we can give to the information we've gathered. For you, our listener, who wants to get smart on important topics without getting bogged down,
You know you value your time.
we're aiming to deliver some of those aha moments. And before we dive in, a huge shout out to all those incredibly resilient colleagues out there
Aye.
who keep navigating change with such dedication. You know who you are.
Absolutely. So let's maybe define our terms a bit more precisely. What is change fatigue, fundamentally?
Good question. Lay it out for us.
It's that feeling of being overwhelmed by the sheer volume and pace of change. It's the psychological cost of continuous adaptation when you just don't have enough time to truly absorb new ways of working or even see the benefits materialize.
So it affects more than just the individual feeling stressed.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just a personal issue. It can significantly undermine an organization's ability to implement positive changes successfully.
It's not just a bit of resistance then. It actively hinders progress.
Precisely.
So let's dig into the why. What are the core drivers behind change fatigue? What really sets this feeling in motion?
Well, there are several interconnected factors at play. The most immediate is often the sheer pace and volume of change.
Right, too much, too fast.
Exactly. When organizations introduce numerous significant changes simultaneously or in rapid succession, it creates this state of constant disruption.
Like you never get your footing.
Pretty much. Employees feel like they're perpetually playing catch-up, never able to fully integrate one change before the next one arrives. It's like trying to learn multiple new languages at once.
Your brain just fries.
Eventually, yeah, your brain just gets overloaded.
That feeling of constantly being in transition sounds incredibly draining. What else fuels this change fatigue?
Another critical factor is a lack of clarity or inadequate communication around the changes.
Ah, the why.
Exactly. If the reasons for a change aren't transparent, or if the expectations aren't clearly articulated, it just breeds confusion and uncertainty.
And people start questioning things.
Yeah, they start to question the rationale behind the changes, maybe feel a lack of control over their own work.
Okay, what else?
Then you have the issue of insufficient support or resources.
Right, being thrown in the deep end.
Kind of. Adapting often requires new skills, tools, processes. If employees aren't provided with the necessary training, guidance, or resources, well, it adds significantly to their stress.
Makes sense. Makes it harder to adapt.
Much harder. And frustrating. Finally, if employees don't perceive the changes as meaningful or beneficial.
If it just seems like change for change's sake.
Precisely. Or if it seems arbitrary, poorly conceived, or even goes against the company's values, it's a real uphill battle to get buy-in, leads to disengagement, resistance.
So it's really about the whole context, not just the change itself. I noticed one of our sources, a study in public money and management, really focused on workload and uncertainty.
Yes, the 2023 study by DeVries and DeVries, good one. It pinpoints two crucial mediating elements. First, increased workload.
Okay. How does that play out?
Well, organizational changes, like restructurings or new systems, often lead to a temporary but sometimes prolonged surge in workload.
So you're doing your old job and learning the new stuff.
Exactly. Employees still have their existing responsibilities, but now they also have to learn new procedures, navigate new roles, potentially take on extra tasks tied to the change. That overload depletes energy fast.
And the second element.
The study highlights psychological uncertainty. Change inherently creates ambiguity about the future.
Right. Worries about your job, your role.
Yeah. Employees may worry about job security, their future roles, what new skills and expectations will be placed upon them. This sustained uncertainty generates anxiety and really contributes to mental exhaustion.
That sounds tough.
And interestingly, this psychological uncertainty can sometimes spill over, impacting even parts of their work that seem unrelated to the specific changes.
Wow. So increased workload coupled with uncertainty about the future, that sounds like a perfect storm for burnout.
It really can be.
So what are the broader consequences of change fatigue for an organization? It's clearly more than just unhappy employees, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most direct impacts is a reduced effectiveness in implementing the changes themselves.
Because people are just too tired to engage.
Exactly. When employees are fatigued, they're less likely to fully engage with and adopt new ways of working. It undermines the very goals of the change initiatives.
And that probably leads to more resistance down the line.
Spot on. This often manifests as resistance to further changes. People become change-averse, hesitant to invest the energy needed for yet another new initiative.
You'd also expect motivation to drop.
Definitely. You'll see a rise in demotivation and disengagement across the workforce. Constant pressure, lack of perceived support, it erodes enthusiasm for work in general.
Which inevitably hits the bottom line, I guess.
Yep. That leads to a decline in overall productivity and morale. Plus, as employees struggle to cope, you might see an increase in errors and oversights.
So it creates this negative feedback loop, hindering the very changes intended to improve things.
That's a good way to put it.
Are there even more serious repercussions, like people actually leaving?
Yes. There's research published back in 2011 that found a strong link between change fatigue and employee exhaustion,
Okay.
which in turn significantly reduces organizational commitment and increases employees' intentions to leave.
That's critical. High turnover is hugely costly.
It really is. Recruitment, training, lost productivity, and it further strains the remaining workforce, potentially making the change fatigue even worse.
So recognizing the signs of change fatigue early is clearly vital. What should we be looking for in our teams and maybe even in ourselves? Let's start with the impact on individuals.
Okay. When an individual is experiencing change fatigue, one of the initial indicators is often decreased engagement and productivity.
It's like they just seem checked out.
Yeah, they might seem less invested in their work and the changes, maybe doing the bare minimum, that phenomenon sometimes called quiet quitting.
Right. What else?
You'll likely also observe increased resistance to change. This can be overt, like complaints.
Or more subtle.
Exactly. More subtle through just a lack of enthusiasm or maybe foot dragging. Elevated burnout and stress levels are also significant red flags.
How does that show up?
It can manifest as emotional and physical exhaustion, heightened irritability, and just this pervasive feeling of being overwhelmed.
Those are definitely key behaviors to watch for. What are some other ways change fatigue might present itself in individuals?
Well, look for lowered morale and job satisfaction. Employees might seem more detached, express feelings of being undervalued or unsupported.
Disillusioned.
Yeah, generally appear disillusioned with their roles and the organization. You might also notice a breakdown in communication.
Misunderstandings cropping up more.
Increased misunderstandings, yeah. Or maybe a reluctance to even participate in discussions about change.
And you mentioned turnover earlier.
Sadly, yes. Change fatigue can contribute to higher rates of absenteeism and employee turnover as people look for more stable environments.
Any other attitude changes?
Other signs include growing cynicism and negative attitudes, a decline in trust towards leadership in the organization.
That sounds like it could get toxic.
It can, potentially creating a toxic atmosphere. And also a lack of adaptability and flexibility, with individuals clinging to familiar routines and resisting new approaches.
It sounds like a significant emotional and mental toll. Are there also maybe more subtle behavioral changes we should be aware of?
Yes, absolutely. Someone struggling might express feeling consistently overwhelmed by their workload, even small tasks. They may lose interest in projects that previously excited them, or exhibit increased friction with colleagues due to heightened irritability.
What about physical signs?
Physical symptoms can also emerge. Things like headaches, difficulty sleeping, changes in appetite. muscle tension.
Wow.
You might also observe disruptions in their work routine, increased difficulty prioritizing tasks, or a reluctance to adopt new tools or technologies.
Feeling disconnected.
Yes, feelings of isolation and disconnection from their team and the organization, becoming easily frustrated or upset by small setbacks,
Worrying about the future.
expressing anxiety or worry about future changes, displaying a more consistently negative outlook, complaining more frequently,
Just feeling worn out all the time.
a persistent feeling of being tired, both mentally and physically, even experiencing physical aches and pains from the stress.
And mentally foggy.
Yeah, mentally they might struggle to learn new things due to a kind of mental fog.
That's a really comprehensive picture of the individual impact. But it's not just an individual issue, is it?
Yeah.
What are some broader organizational strategic signs that change fatigue might be taking hold?
That's right. We need to look at the bigger picture, too. There was some work by Bodan back in 2016 that highlighted this. One key organizational sign is external questioning of the change's value or objectives.
Meaning other departments or even customers.
Exactly. If other departments, stakeholders, or even customers start expressing doubts about the purpose or benefits of the change initiatives, it suggests a lack of clear understanding or buy-in, possibly fueled by fatigue.
What else points to a problem at that level?
Another red flag is stressed or departing change leaders and coordinators. These folks are often on the front lines.
Right, if they're burning out or leaving.
It signals a potentially unsustainable process. You might also see a reluctance to share data on the progress or outcomes of change efforts.
Which breeds mistrust.
Can do, yes. Or maybe a diversion of budget and resources towards other initiatives, indicating perhaps a loss of confidence in the current changes.
What about customer impact?
Customer impatience with the duration or impact of the change can be a significant warning sign. It might suggest a negative impact on service quality or a failure to deliver promised improvements.
And finally, what about leadership involvement?
Yeah, if key leaders are not actively participating in progress review meetings, it can signal a lack of sustained commitment, which is, absolutely crucial for successful change.
These broader signs really highlight how change fatigue can ripple outwards and affect the entire organization's ability to function effectively. Okay, so we've identified the problem, its symptoms. Now for the crucial question. How do we actually overcome change fatigue?
Right.
I imagine it requires more than just, pizza parties or telling people to be more resilient.
Absolutely not. Overcoming change fatigue demands a thoughtful and strategic approach. It really centers on three main things: clear and consistent communication, providing robust support, and implementing change at a sustainable pace.
Okay, let's delve into those. Communication first. How can organizations communicate effectively during times of significant change? What does that look like?
Well, effective communication goes beyond just announcing what's changing. It involves clearly explaining the reasons why the change is necessary.
The purpose behind it.
Exactly. And how it aligns with the organization's bigger goals. This helps reduce that uncertainty we talked about and fosters a sense of purpose.
So leaders need to be good communicators.
Leaders need to demonstrate strong emotional intelligence, articulating the vision clearly while also acknowledging and addressing the emotional and psychological impact of the change on employees.
And not just assume people get it.
Crucially, yes, leaders shouldn't assume their messages have been fully understood. Actively seeking feedback, demonstrating empathy, that's essential.
What about updates?
Regular updates on progress and communicating a clear, long-term strategic plan can also provide reassurance and context.
Okay, clear communication is vital for transparency. What about providing adequate support? What does that look like in practice?
Providing adequate support means ensuring employees have the necessary resources, training, and emotional support to navigate the changes.
So more than just a one-off workshop.
Definitely. It includes offering ongoing training and development, not just one-time sessions. Providing access to necessary tools and tech, maybe establishing mentorship programs or peer support network.
And manager involvement.
Leaders should conduct regular check-ins with their teams, maintain open-door policies, create safe spaces where employees feel comfortable voicing concerns without fear of reprisal.
Sounds like empathy is key.
Continuous empathetic leadership is absolutely key. Understanding where individuals are in their change journey, tailoring support accordingly. Some places have success appointing change champions within teams for peer support too.
So it's about creating a supportive ecosystem, not just a single training event. Okay. And the final element you mentioned was a thoughtful pace of change. Why is that so critical?
Well, implementing changes at a pace that allows individuals and teams to adapt without feeling rushed or overwhelmed is just fundamental to preventing change fatigue.
Gives people breathing room.
Exactly. A more deliberate pace gives people time to absorb new information, integrate new processes, and maybe see some tangible results before the next wave hits.
And acknowledging effort helps.
Recognizing and celebrating individual and team contributions to the change process can provide a real sense of accomplishment and purpose.
So prioritize changes.
Organizations should definitely prioritize change initiatives based on urgency and impact, and where possible, phase things in or focus on smaller, incremental improvements rather than huge transformations all at once.
Those three pillars, communication, support, and pacing, seem essential. Are there other strategies organizations can use to mitigate change fatigue?
Yeah, beyond those core elements, embedding change management principles into daily operations can help. Make change feel less disruptive, more like a natural part of how things get done.
What about recognition?
Prioritizing employee recognition, celebrating both big and small wins related to the change that can significantly boost morale.
And workplace structure itself.
Rethinking workplace structures and expectations could help. Maybe exploring more flexible work arrangements or results-oriented environments can give employees more control.
Investing in leaders.
Definitely. Investing in developing leaders who are adept at navigating change, leaders with strong emotional intelligence, clear communication, ability to foster adaptability that's crucial long-term.
Getting employees involved.
Actively involving employees in planning and design, genuinely listening to feedback that fosters ownership and reduces resistance.
Build confidence.
Highlighting past successful change initiatives can build confidence in the organization's ability to handle future transitions.
What about managing expectations?
It's important for leaders to acknowledge that short-term dips in performance might be inevitable during big changes.
And check if it's working.
Actively solicit feedback from staff to evaluate the effectiveness of change efforts. Ultimately, though,
Yes.
it comes down to building a culture of trust where employees feel leadership genuinely cares about their well-being. That's paramount.
It really sounds like managing change effectively and combating change fatigue requires a very human-centric and strategic approach. Let's maybe revisit those warning signs we discussed earlier, but frame them now as leading and lagging indicators. What are some lagging indicators of change fatigue, the outcomes we see once it's already taken hold?
Right. Lagging indicators are the results that become apparent after change fatigue has set in.
Okay, like what?
These include things like decreased levels of employee engagement and productivity, higher rates of employee turnover, increased absenteeism, and a noticeable increase in resistance to new changes.
Morale drops too.
Yes. Lower overall morale and job satisfaction. You might also observe breakdowns in communication between teams or departments.
Negative attitudes.
A rise in cynicism and negative attitudes among employees, and higher reported levels of burnout and stress.
Physical symptoms. Customer complaints.
Additionally, you might see an increase in physical symptoms reported by employees and potentially increased complaints from customers about the impact or pace of the changes.
So those are the outcomes we look back on and realize, change fatigue was a big issue. What about the leading indicators? The early signals that fatigue might be building or is likely to occur soon.
Leading indicators are those really valuable early warning signs. They can help you proactively address potential change fatigue.
Okay, give us some examples.
One key indicator is just the sheer number of significant changes employees are currently facing. Some research suggests, for example, that dealing with more than 10 major changes in a year significantly increases the risk.
Wow, 10. What else?
Another leading indicator is a decline in employees' stated willingness to support upcoming changes. If that number drops, pay attention.
Trust levels matter.
Absolutely. Low levels of trust in leadership and a lack of strong team cohesion are also predictive of increased susceptibility to change fatigue.
What about external signals?
You might observe external stakeholders beginning to question the value or direction of the changes, or see key change leaders or coordinators exhibiting signs of stress or even leaving the organization.
Data hoarding, budget shifts.
A reluctance among teams to share data or progress updates on change initiatives could be a sign, or a reallocation of budget or resources away from key change projects.
And leadership visibility again?
Low attendance or engagement from key leaders in change progress reviews is another one.
Anything else on the ground level?
Finally, just an increase in the frequency with which employees express feelings of being overwhelmed, or a noticeable rise in negativity or cynical comments during team meetings. Those can be early warning signs. Fatigue is on the horizon.
Those leading indicators are incredibly valuable because they offer that chance for early intervention.
Exactly. Much better to catch it early.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive, it's important to consider the reliability of the information we've discussed. Can you give us a brief overview of the level of trust we might place in our various sources?
Certainly. So academic studies, the ones published in peer-reviewed journals like Public Money and Management or Work and Stress,
Those generally carry high trust.
generally high trust, yes, due to the rigorous research methods and peer review.
What about HR websites, leadership blogs like Changing Point, Forbes, WalkMe?
Those offer medium to high trust. They often provide really valuable insights based on practical experience and industry expertise.
But maybe with a caveat.
Just be mindful that some might have a degree of promotional content or reflect the specific perspectives of the authors. Still very useful, though.
Okay. And surveys, like that Gallagher poll.
Surveys like that have medium trust. They offer a snapshot of opinions, in that case from HR pros, at a particular time. Useful data, but it's a snapshot.
What about expert interviews, like the YouTube ones?
Expert opinions shared in less formal settings, like interviews with folks such as Noah Ronan, carry medium trust. They bring valuable experience, but the insights haven't necessarily undergone the same formal scrutiny as academic papers.
Right. And the Society of Occupational Medicine.
They provide guidance based on research and expert consensus within their professional body, so their recommendations get a high level of trust.
Okay. And finally, the AI summaries, like the Grok output.
AI-generated summaries typically have a lower level of trust because the underlying sources aren't always transparent. Though in this instance, it did cite Gartner surveys, which lends some credibility to those specific data points it mentioned.
That's a really helpful overview of our sources. Helps put everything in context. So, to summarize our deep dive into change fatigue, what's the key message you'd like our listeners to take away?
I think the core message is that change fatigue is a significant, multifaceted challenge in today's rapidly changing work environment. It's real.
And it has real consequences.
Tangible consequences, yes, for both individuals and organizations. But, and this is important, it is not inevitable.
It can be managed.
It can. By prioritizing clear and empathetic communication, providing comprehensive support to employees, and implementing change at a sustainable, thoughtful pace, organizations can significantly mitigate the risks and negative impacts.
And for you, our listener, being aware of these signs both in yourself maybe and within your teams, that's the first crucial step. Take a moment maybe to consider the level of change in your own context. Are there any leading indicators you've observed? Which of the strategies we've discussed might be most applicable to your situation?
And that brings us to our final thought for you to mull over. In a world that seems to be in constant flux, constant evolution, how can we cultivate not just resilience to change,
Which is important, but
a genuine capacity to embrace meaningful progress without succumbing to the pervasive exhaustion of change fatigue?
that's a great question to end on. How do we find that balance?
Something to think about. We encourage you to explore the resources we've mentioned if you want to dig deeper, and just continue to think critically about how we can navigate change more effectively and sustainably.